I hate the term. I think it's a stupid term, street photography. I don't think it makes any, it tells you anything about a photographer or work, in a way.
That's Gary Winogrand, widely considered to be one of the greatest street photographers of all time. Do you see a bit of a problem there? Now, when a photographer who's idolised across the world as being one of the greatest of street photography says they don't like the term street photography, that kind of begs the question, what actually is street photography? If anyone walks past right now, they're going to think I'm talking to a hedge, so I'm going to try and make this bit quick.
Put their trust in us, many of them for the first time, and Boris will have my full support as he does that.
Well, I don't know why he's talking to a tree.
If you ask 10 different street photographers about what street photography is, then you're probably going to get 10 different answers. Some people will say it's about being in public, and other people will say that it has to be candid, and some people will say that doesn't matter. Others will say that it's all about capturing a human moment and being up close and personal, and others will say it's more about standing back and capturing a more abstract feeling towards a scene. Some will say it's all about being invisible and no one's seeing you, and others will say that doesn't matter, and you get right up in their face and capture those kind of real aggressive kind of photographs. And there's a bunch of different definitions floating about online. But I struggle to find any of the greats of street photography defining what street photography actually is. Even Carolyn Drake, who's a Magnum photographer, has said, hit like and subscribe. Just kidding. What she actually said was, I think every photographer should define what the street means to them in their own way. There's no one way of defining street photography. But if no one can really agree what street photography actually is, then what is it that we're all doing? And I think one of the biggest points about street photography that people bring up is that it always has to be candid. So that's what we'll talk about next. So what does candid actually mean in street photography? Well, for me, it just simply means that you're taking a photograph of a person or people without them knowing that you're taking a photograph of them. So why would you want to do that? Well, what it boils down to is that you've seen something interesting that someone's doing or a moment that's passing by, and you want to capture that moment, capture that thing that you've found interesting about the person or people without spoiling it, without stopping it, without interfering with it in any way. But I do think sometimes people obsess about whether a moment is truly candid or not, like that's what makes it a valid street photo. But I've seen so many photographs that are posed or semi-posed that just seem so human and real. For example, Sage Sawyer, who I've talked about before on this channel, I think her work's just absolutely fantastic, but a lot of her work is her going into these communities, stopping a car, going to someone's front porch and saying, hey, I think you guys look great, can I take some photographs of you? Just carry on doing what you were doing. So they carry on doing what they were doing and she'd just snap away a few frames and then leave. So she's asked for permission, she's gone into the scene, she's sort of disturbed it, but she has said, just kind of carry on doing what you're doing and let me take some photographs. Is that street photography or is that not street photography? Does it matter? I think candidness is more of a technique rather than an actual purpose or a definition of what street photography is. You can incorporate candidness into your photography to express these sort of moments that you'd miss otherwise, but it doesn't define who you are as a photographer. When I first started my 9-to-5 job, I was talking to my boss about my hobbies, and I said I was into photography, and he asked me what kind of photography I like to do. So I said, street photography. And he was kind of like, so you take photographs of paving slabs and stuff? I mean, he thought that I was interested in taking actual photographs of the street itself. And then I kind of went, no, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in photographing people. So he said, like portrait photography? No, like people without their permission. Like, oh, that's kind of creepy, no?
Shit. Got your ass.
That kind of conversation has fizzled out a little bit. But I think a lot of the time we do think about the actual physical street as a thing to photograph, like it becomes like the main character of an image, like it's all about the light or how this architecture looks or whatever. And well, is that street photography? Like, is it street photography if you're taking a photograph of the street without anyone in it? Does street photography have to have a person in it? But for me, the photos that resonate the most are the ones with people in it, where the street isn't the main character. It's like a container for this sort of human interaction or moment or feeling. And that's what resonates with me. But again, that still doesn't define street photography, and that isn't exactly what street photography is. So if street photography is not about the actual street, and it's not necessarily about capturing candid moments, what is it about a street photograph that sticks in our mind? What is it actually all about? Think about your favourite street photograph. The chances are that it tells some kind of story, it has a bit of narrative, even if it's just a hint. For me, a great photograph is never about technical perfection, it's more about how it makes you feel. It's the emotional weight of the image, it's what draws you in and just makes you feel something. So perhaps emotion and context and story is what street photography is all about, but that's hardly a definition. And with that comes a bit of a problem. If you're always trying to get an emotion or a story or something really grand in your images, then you can fall into a kind of trap. So if we define street photography as always having some kind of emotion or moment or something spectacular in a frame, then that can be quite difficult to do, right? Or I say quite, very difficult to do. If you go out into the streets, take photographs, you can't control anything. All you can control is when you choose to press the shutter, and you might go out and not see anything. But does that mean that if you go out and not get a banger photograph that you're not doing street photography or that you failed? What if you go out and just capture a quiet moment? Or if you capture a scene that's interesting to you but doesn't have any people in it? Again, is that still street photography? And if we go out with this attitude of always trying to look for a banger, then that ultimately just can result in feeling disappointed, because how often does that happen? The other thing we can do as well is try and chase likes on social media. Like, we can look for trends and we can start trying to do that kind of photography. And ultimately that just results in either copying or feeling unfulfilled or just constantly being on this hamster wheel. And how can you be creative like that? So what is street photography like? What are we actually doing? So here's what I've come to think, and that is that street photography is simply documentary. Now, before you switch off the video, I don't mean that you need to start calling yourself a documentary photographer or label yourself one or the other. But if you start thinking of street photography in terms of just documenting, purely documenting what's interesting to you, then that just opens up a whole world of photographic opportunities. So Gary Winogrand, Joel Meyerowitz, Vivian Meyer, Mary Ellen Mark, the list goes on and on and on of all the greats of street photography. But what are they really? They're not street photographers. Not all of their work falls into a category like that. They're just photographers. They just document. Maybe it's not about how we define street photography anyway. It's really about how we see and what we choose to remember. Now, you might be thinking, well, thanks for all this information, Tim, but I don't agree with you, or I do agree with you. That's up for you to decide. Let me know in the comments. But if you do feel a little bit like this is now a bit too broad, I want to have more of a niche, or I don't really know what kind of photography to do, what's the point? Well, that's what I made this video for.
You know, on the subject, I mean, I have a book out called The Animals. Call me the same as zoo photographer. I mean, the whole thing don't make any sense to me, you know.